Rocky Marciano was born into poor Italian immigrant parents and had to become a floor sweeper in a shoe factory just to help make ends meet. Dropping out of high school, he worked tirelessly at other jobs such as ditch digging, hating every second. He didn't even start boxing until his mid-20s, and his own trainer said he had 2 left feet, reluctant to even train him. Despite his lack of physical gifts and humble beginnings, he refused to let that define him and became one of the greatest heavyweight boxers in history. So how did a poor immigrant factory worker become boxing's most punishing champion? This is the full story of the Brockton Blockbuster, Rocky Marciano. Born Rocco Francis Marciano in 1923 to Italian immigrants in Brockton, Massachusetts, Rocky's life was defined by the hardworking immigrant spirit. His father was a shoemaker, barely scraping by, and his mother held the family together through years of poverty. The challenging conditions forced a young teenage Rocky to find solace in baseball, his first love. Living across the street from a playground, he would spend countless hours hitting and chasing after baseballs. After, he would go home and begin exercising extensively, performing countless repetitions using either chin-ups or homemade weights. After dinner, Rocky and his friends would spend hours enthusiastically punching a stuffed mail sack they had hung from an oak tree in his backyard. Due to the rough upbringing of Marciano, it lent itself to involvement in many street fights, mainly due to territorial disputes around his neighborhood. This youthful energy was soon transferred to football and baseball, where he would see success on his high school's varsity teams. However, the economic hardships of the Great Depression forced him to drop out of high school to help support the family, working odd jobs as a ditch digger, a landscaper, and even working at his father's Brockton shoe factory as a floor sweeper. He detested the grueling work, which he felt was demeaning and made him desperately seek a better life for himself and his family. Luckily, the onset of the Second World War provided a temporary escape. In 1943, like many young men of his generation, Marciano was drafted into the U.S. Army, where he was stationed in Wales and trained as a transport driver. But it wasn't the Army that made him a boxer, it was a twist of fate. Rocky first laced up his gloves in an amateur tournament to avoid kitchen duty. After a couple of wins and sparring partners running in short supply, Marciano was sanctioned to have 2 amateur fights. These fights resulted in brutal first-round knockouts for Marciano, except one problem. During the second fight, he seriously injured the knuckles on his left hand. After inspecting the injury, a Japanese medical officer and friend of Marciano even said that it would now be impossible for him to make it as a heavyweight boxer. However, as we'll see later in the video, Rocky took this advice and paid it no regard, even fighting another amateur fight with just one hand. After being discharged from the Army in 1946, Marciano returned to Brockton, searching for direction. He tried baseball one more time, however the door was shut firmly after a Chicago Cubs representative stated that he had no talent. Realizing a career in boxing was much more suited to his goals, he returned to Brockton again with renewed sense of purpose. After a promising set of amateur boxing fights that saw him finish runner-up in the New England Golden Gloves tournament, Marciano turned pro in 1948. However, there were a great many things that would prove to hinder the future champion. Standing at just 5 foot 10 inches and weighing under 190 pounds, he was smaller than most opponents. His arms only measured 67 inches, and his stocky physique was compared to a penguin. And he had a wonky style. He stumbled, his punches were wild, and his footwork almost non-existent. Quite the picture of someone who should have pursued another profession. However, there were 2 bright spots for Marciano. His right hand was deadly, with his short reach allowing for maximum force development in his punches. Both Al Wheel, who developed Rocky's brutal, close-in fighting style, and Charlie Goldman, a seasoned trainer who focused on making the most of Rocky's raw power, were instrumental in squeezing the most out of Marciano's limited physical advantages. Rocky's power was important, but it was his legendary training intensity and determination that was his other defining factor. Every day he ran 5 to 6 miles alongside his trainer and close friend Ali Colombo, who motivated him throughout the grueling runs. Marciano pushed himself to the limit, sprinting uphill at full speed and then running back down backwards. He incorporated cross-training into his regimen by shadowboxing for 45 minutes in a swimming pool, with the water reaching up to his shoulders. In the gym, Marciano meticulously refined his skills through countless hours of sparring, endless repetitions on the heavy and speed bags, thousands of push-ups and sit-ups, and enduring medicine ball strikes to his abdomen. These rigorous preparations were instrumental in preparing him for the harsh realities of professional boxing that his career would be a testament to. Marciano's path to the top wasn't an easy one. Despite his unorthodox style, he rose through the ranks, facing and defeating seasoned opponents like Roland Lastarza and Joe Louis, a former champion who saw his career end at Marciano's fists. Louis's defeat sent a powerful message. Rocky wasn't here to fill a roster, he was here to make history. Then came September 23, 1952, the night Marciano took on the reigning heavyweight champion, Jersey Joe Walcott. Walcott, a slick, skilled fighter, was considered too experienced and too crafty for the younger Marciano. But Rocky wasn't there to put on a show, he was there to win. The fight was grueling. Walcott dominated early rounds, cutting Rocky and battering him with sharp punches. But Marciano kept pushing, absorbing punch after punch. And then, in the 13th round, Rocky unleashed a punch that would go down in history, his infamous Susie Q right hand. It was a single, powerful shot that knocked Walcott out cold, making Marciano the new heavyweight champion. Rocky Marciano was now the heavyweight champion of the world, proving that heart and grit could overcome technique. He didn't just win the title, he left a mark on boxing that night, solidifying his identity as the hardest-hitting heavyweight the sport had ever seen. However, right as Rocky had achieved his dream, he would face a test that would nearly strip him of the title he had just worked so hard for. In 1954, Marciano faced former champion Ezzard Charles not once, but twice. Their first encounter was a punishing fight, with Marciano narrowly claiming victory. However, it was their second bout that would become legendary, for all the wrong reasons. In the second fight, Charles landed a blow that split Marciano's nose wide open. Blood poured down his face, and doctors considered stopping the fight. But Marciano wouldn't quit. He battled through the injury, unleashing a ferocity rarely seen in the ring. In the end, Rocky knocked Charles out, but not without enduring a level of punishment few champions had ever faced. After Charles, Rocky moved on to knock out British heavyweight champion Don Cockell, and in 1956 faced off against the experienced Archie Moore. Moore, confident in his abilities, had described Rocky as crude, expecting an advantage. However, Marciano's relentless footwork and strong defense kept Moore on the defensive, ultimately leading to another knockout victory, Rocky's 49th. Later, Moore remarked that fighting Rocky was like battling an airplane propeller, calling him the strongest opponent he had ever faced. After the fight, Marciano admitted, "This will be my last." Training had become grueling, his back arched from years of his unique style, and he longed for more time with his family. At 32, with 4 years of dominance in the heavyweight division, Marciano chose to retire at the top of his game. Rocky's undefeated record stands to this day. After 49 wins and 0 losses, he was and still is the only heavyweight champion to leave the sport without a single defeat. But Marciano wasn't just a boxer, he was an icon of resilience. He represented the dream that no matter where you come from, hard work and determination can take you to the top. His impact stretched beyond boxing, becoming a symbol for Italian Americans and anyone who came from humble beginnings. To them, Marciano was proof that you didn't have to be born into greatness to achieve it. His record was more than just numbers, it was an unbreakable story of grit and heart. Rocky's name still echoes in boxing history. His fighting style, his unyielding spirit, and his underdog story inspired generations, showing that success isn't about having the perfect form or the ideal build. It's about having the will to rise when others would stay down.